session, a blueprint of global education. Let's watch an audio visual on the purpose of the discussion in this session.
क्लाइमेट चेंज, आतंकवाद और आर्म्स कंट्रोल जैसी समस्याओं से जूझ रही दुनिया को अभूतपूर्व वैश्विक सहयोग की जरूरत होगी। ग्लोबलाइजेशन ने स्टूडेंट्स को हर स्तर पर प्रभावित किया है, फिर चाहे वो लोकल हो, नेशनल हो या इंटरनेशनल। अ ब्लूप्रिंट ऑफ ग्लोबल एजुकेशन के सेशन में IIM, ISB और प्लाक्षा यूनिवर्सिटी के प्रतिनिधि चर्चा करेंगे कि इस नई हकीकत का सामना करने के लिए वो स्टूडेंट्स को किस तरह से तैयार कर रहे हैं।
Please escort the panelists on the stage. Mr. DNV Kumaraguru, Director, Marketing and Communications, ISB Mohali. Pallavi Jain, Director, Strategy and Programs, Plaksha University. Professor Siddharth Gaurav Majhi, Chairperson, Information and Instructional Technology Resources, IIM, Amritsar. Mr. Kumaraguru is a past National Chair of CII Young Indians. Guru follows Indian politics and gets restless if he cannot lay his hands on a newspaper as per the website of ISB Mohali. Pallavi Jain is the youngest member of the executive group at Plaksha University and is working on reimagining the field of technological education. Siddharth Gaurav Majhi comes from the field of information systems and business analytics. He has interned with Goldman Sachs and Steel Authority of India. Over to you, Jyoti Kamal.
Thank you so much, Arshi. Thank you, Guru. Thank you, Pallavi. Thank you, Siddharth, for participating in this education summit. We were talking about certain interesting kind of trends that are there in higher technical education and how there are attempts being made to kind of change it. They are moving at different kind of pace levels. Some are at pace, some should be at pace, some people want it to be at pace, but there are kind of external bottlenecks. But when one looks at ISB, when one looks at Plaksha, when one looks at the new kind of IIMs, there's a different model that is being adopted. And in fact, ISB was one of the first ones to actually experiment with that, to bring in a very flexible kind of system of education where you would actually bring in global kind of knowledge which would blend in with the Indian education systems and diversify them further. What has your experience been, Guru, with ISB and this globalizing of education, which was like a new trendsetter in India?
Thank you very much, Jyoti, for inviting me here. Good evening, everyone. 2 days ago, we had the honor of hosting Prime Minister Narendra Modi at ISB for our 20th year celebrations. He was also addressing the graduating students of the class of 2022, which included students from Mohali and the Hyderabad campus. So something that he mentioned there, I want to quote, he tweeted subsequently as well. It's probably in some sense a response to the question that you just asked. He said the world is recognizing that India means business, and I'm pretty much quoting verbatim, and he says it's because of the efforts of institutions like ISB that we are able to do this. I don't think he means only ISB, it's not at all, but I think he means institutions like ISB. Credit goes to a large number of higher education institutions. What have we been able to do in the last 20 years in some sense trying to change at least I limit my observations to management education, which is where we are, unlike other larger universities, multidisciplinary universities, is I think we did 3 things. When we started off as an idea in the late 90s, which is right after the liberalization of the economy, there was the economy was opening up, there was this need felt for a very large pool of talent that this country needed, right? So a large number of industry leaders came together and said, let's set up a new business school, right? There were 3 things that we focused on. One, that we would be research driven, and there was a mention about research and its importance in the previous panel as well. 2, we would be globally top ranked, right? And we'll come to why that is important. And 3, the emphasis was that we'll be independent. In India, in higher education, irrespective of how much efforts that are going on, it's important for us to be independent both from the regulatory aspect as well as financially as well, right? And these were the 3 things that we set upon ourselves. I think we will, sort of say with some confidence as we step into the third decade of ISB, that we've been able to sort of be true to this path that we sort of set upon ourselves. One, we are globally ranked at number 32 worldwide, right, in the Financial Times ranking, consistently in the top sort of this thing. In terms of research, we are the only Indian management institution in the UT Dallas management ranking that comes out every year. And independent, yes, it's a matter of a little bit of debate, and that's something that we can always sort of, engage in further conversations. But I think the larger thing I would draw our attention to is that this is not the effort of one individual, right? Again, I'll quote the Prime Minister. He said, ISB के success के पीछे बहुत लोगों की तपस्या है. I think it's absolutely true. When Prime Minister Vajpayee inaugurated ISB, he said ISB is a Rashtra Dakshina, right? And I think it's not about ISB. Every institution should see itself as a Rashtra Dakshina in India. We should see ourselves as a gift to the nation, because we may be private in our structure, in our management, but our outlook should be public. I think all institutions are public in nature. So I think this is a good example of how private philanthropy has come together for a larger public good. And I think in terms of, as we, whether you want to call it a $5 trillion economy, or you want to talk about anything as far as measurable metrics may vary, but if India truly wants to count herself on the global sort of, platforms, I think the only way it will achieve is if higher education institutions produce really top talent, not just students. I think we are already there as far as students are concerned. I think we have to have our faculty being counted amongst the top in the world, and that only will happen when we will focus on research and we will incentivize research, right? Otherwise, I think we will, when Professor Abhijit Banerjee won the Nobel 2-3 years ago, there will be 9 p.m. news, including, people like Jyoti will say, why can't we have Indian academics win Nobel in India? And next day the news cycle changes, we'll all go back to our own lives. And the answer lies because we like to talk about it, but can we as higher education institutions, and I don't think we should blame the government or industry or anyone else, can we as higher education institutions, can we change the way we are focusing on research? I think that is the fundamental to a lot of things. We have to become knowledge creators and not just knowledge disseminators. I'll pause here.
We have to be knowledge creators is what Guru says. Talking about Plaksha University, Ashoka University, which is like a sister university, the liberal arts university. Firstly, I wanted to ask, what's the opposite of liberal arts? The formal arts? What is, I don't know. Why do we call them the liberal arts? So is there something like liberal science? Is that what Plaksha is about? So in any case, like Plaksha again, the model that he was talking about, a lot of founders come together and they are like private individuals and they have a common public vision for excellence in higher education. And then ISB was nurtured there, and then it's grown by leaps and bounds from there because of the kind of talent that came in right in the beginning in terms of the thinking process. Same is what has happened with Ashoka and now happening with Plaksha. How do you look upon Plaksha? Because it's like the counterpart of Ashoka in a way. So how do you look upon Plaksha? What is different about Plaksha in terms of an engineering college as one would normally imagine it?
Hello, am I audible? Okay. Thanks a lot for that question, Jyoti, and thanks, Guru, for everything that you shared. You're absolutely right that ISB and Ashoka set a really good trend in terms of reimagining business education and reimagining liberal arts education. And Plaksha is now reimagining tech education as we know it and understand it. I would say this is happening in 3 ways, which is what we consider as our mission. The first one is reimagining the education side of it itself, which is to not just think of technology in terms of isolated disciplines, but in terms of making it more interdisciplinary, integrating technology with liberal arts, with humanities, with business, making it a lot more oriented around real-world problems. Finally, engineering is not about things, it's for people. So how do you create the sort of graduates who will go out and create solutions to problems that we face around us? How do we make it more experiential, hands-on, so that students don't just graduate with narrow skills or knowledge, but how to apply that in the real world? So this is around reimagining the education side of it. The second part of it is around building entrepreneurial mindset. India as a country has leaps and bounds to go in this and so much potential. And as a tech institution, we have the scope to create unicorns from India, to create global companies. And we, as a university that is set up by entrepreneurs, there are more than 100 founders and donors behind the initiative. Most of them are first generation entrepreneurs. This is something that is inherent to Plaksha's culture, and that is also seeping through in students. As an example, students from the first graduating batch already got selected in Y Combinator and so on. So this is a part of the culture from the start. And the third part is, and related to what Guru was saying, is around how we think about research. As a tech institution, it would be incomplete without research, and that has to be front and center. It is the way in which one attracts top faculty around the world, and it is the core mission of an institution. But what we also want to do differently on the research side is to anchor it around themes of global relevance, what we call grand challenges. So there is research for the sake of research, but there is research for solving larger problems. And as a university, we have picked a few themes that we want to put dedicated energy behind, which are themes such as digital agriculture, clean energy, water security, and so on, which are highly multidisciplinary. So if you pick up this as a problem statement, it is not linked to one specific engineering discipline, and engineering is only one part of it. It requires several engineering disciplines, it requires sciences, it requires humanities, it requires business. How do we put all these things together in the context of solving problems? That is how we want to anchor our research efforts, and we're amazed to find how faculty whom we've recruited are actually working together from completely different areas and working on common problems that they're passionate about.
Pallavi, but I would like to come back to what you just said, that there is so much talent here. One of your first kind of graduating batches, somebody has gone to Y Combinator, and yet that entrepreneurial leap that should be taken is not being taken. How come that's not happening? I mean, just to kind of dissect that problem. India is full of problems everywhere. Everything is, I say India is full of unicorns. I mean, there are $1 billion lying everywhere. Solve any one problem at scale, you're a unicorn. Solve the next small problem, which is even roadside berms, getting them right, you are a unicorn. So this country is full of $1 billion potentials, but yet it's not happening. Why is that not happening? I mean, institutes of excellence are there, that education is there, the desire to kind of do well is there. So that where is that gap? What is being done by institutes like Plaksha to address that?
Sure, it's a great question. So I think the gap is along the entire value chain. It starts with education, but there are many other things after that, BATs of doing business and various other things that come after that. I won't focus on all the other things. I'll focus on the role of educational institutions in this. And what we strongly believe in is the need to create an entrepreneurial mindset, which is different from creating entrepreneurs. Because an entrepreneurial mindset not just results in people who will go out and create startups and companies, but also entrepreneurs, people who will go into companies and create products over there, or who will go into companies and do more than what they're asked to do, take initiative, go into new territories. So that mindset is what we want to focus on. Now, as a mindset, what that would mean is students who take initiative, who focus on creating value. Often the way education is designed, they are put through a process where they don't have a lot of choice. And they are measured around metrics which does not give importance to these things. It's around grades, it's around certain things. So students will also anchor themselves to things that they are measured on. Whereas as an institution, we can completely turn that around. We can change the way in which we assess students. We can change the way in which we give opportunities to them. One of the things that's being spoken a lot in education circles these days around the world is around student-centered learning, where you make students in charge of their own learning journey. They think they're not just following a system that has been laid out for them by somebody else, but actually think about the sort of paths that they want to create for themselves, and faculty serve as mentors and guides to help them through that process. These sort of things build that mindset in students from the start. At Plaksha, what we are also doing is we are trying to create micro enterprises on campus, which is to say, if you think about, let's say, a food system on campus or water system on campus, how can you think of this as a mini business which students can actually create and run? How do they think about, how to get the best nutritious food at lowest cost and so on, and actually run that enterprise? There are some places around the world that do that. At Harvard Business School, they try to get students to learn management concepts by implementing them on the campus. So if they have services being offered, they should be done with the best level of marketing, customer service, etc. So at an engineering institution, how can we build in these mindsets? If we are talking about clean energy, it's not just about doing that at a global level. It's about how we implement that on our campus, in our buildings. And these are things that will build them as entrepreneurs. And I feel that as a greenfield institution, there is so much opportunity for students to build things from scratch, and that mindset will then result in various other things that happen in their life, including creating companies, but not limited to that.
Right. Yeah, like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're so caught up in the basics itself of living out your lives in India. Perhaps, I don't know if that is also a factor which kind of keeps you so caught up that you don't reach the self-actualization oblique entrepreneurial mindset level, because you're so caught up just making sure that you have food on the table, you're able to kind of get basics kind of sorted.
And entrepreneurial mindset helps in that.
I know. I know if you look at a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they're actually the ones who have come from backgrounds which would have been pretty challenging.
Exactly.
I mean, the moment your challenges are ironed out, it in fact becomes difficult to have the entrepreneurial mindset. I don't know. Though there are exceptions everywhere. I mean, there's no formula that one can say that, okay, this is what is going to lead to it.
Right, because when you're in a resource-constrained environment, that's where entrepreneurial energy is born.
Yes.
If you have all of those resources, you don't require it.
Yes. In fact, Siddharth, there is a program that Plaksha has also started, which is the YTS, Young Tech Scholars. Yes, Young Technology Scholars. For example, Netflix. You watch Netflix, it starts kind of, its algorithms start figuring out what is it that you like, and then start giving you suggestions and titles based on what you are watching and what you are likely to like. Same thing happens with Amazon. You kind of have a purchase history, and Amazon starts predicting what you are likely to like and start showing that on your feed. Facebook does that. A lot of these tech-driven kind of organizations which are banking on big data are actually predicting what you're likely to like. Why is that not happening in education yet? You talk to a 10th standard student, you talk to a 11th standard student, they have no clue what they want to do. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't. So why aren't these algorithms being able to pick out, or are you seeing a possibility of that happening, that like programs like YTS will actually start providing the variable inputs into that to actually be able to predict that this is an area that you can get into, this is what you need to learn, this is what you need to brush up, this is an add-on, this is a top-up, this is what you need to definitely kind of get the legal kind of underpinnings for, and then create a sort of education which is customized instead of it being like en masse. So, I mean, if you talk about that, how do you kind of see that happening? Is it likely to happen at some point in time? So, considering that you have a computer science background.
Right. So, good evening everyone. A very interesting question. So what you talked about is something known as a recommendation engine or recommendation system, right? Which looks at what someone has liked in the past or what someone has done in the past to predict what they will do in the future. Now, the idea that you presented, why not take it to the education sector and offer extremely customized programs, right? Hyper customization, you may call it. Now, there could be many issues. While the idea in itself is interesting and we could work towards that slowly as a nation, the problem is going to be of scale, right? Now, imagine a scenario, take any educational institution, be it an emerging institution, which may have less faculty, less resources, or a well-established institution which may be around for half a decade or half a century or a century, right? Now, when you start offering these customizations, the challenges will come in things like, do you have faculty to cater to all those different customizations? How do you schedule classes, right? So, if the learning program is going to be self-learning based in some way, either you can have like experts globally providing inputs in terms of video lectures, etc., then the students can be given customized programs. But in a traditional setup or the conventional setup we have going on, having this kind of customization is going to be difficult. That's one. Secondly, we have to understand that while we have discussed a lot about innovation and the need to innovate, we have to also understand that innovation is not the only way that a nation or the world will progress, right? Innovation has to go hand in hand with day-to-day activities happening. We cannot ignore the well-oiled machinery which has been going on for last thousands of years or hundreds of years and then suddenly innovate to something else, right? So, while the idea that you present is extremely interesting, we can start at a small scale. We can start offering it to a small bunch of students who may be, let's say, picked up based on some criteria and do this, while a large majority of students for whom the imperative might still be to just get trained for the industry and become industry ready and work. why force them to become innovators, I would say. Not everyone is an innovator. Getting the wrong person to innovate might also be dangerous both for them as well as the society as a whole.
Group, moving on from there in terms of being able to actually algorithmically predict what somebody might be interested in and offering them custom-made kind of solutions. In a way, that has started happening, but that's like a voluntary thing. You have to pick out what you want to do, mix and match. You have so many online academies now. You have Coursera, you have so many edtech startups that are there. You can mix and match. There was a time with ISB also when it was a challenge that what is the degree that ISB will offer? Will it be a degree that you will get at the end of your management program? And it was a diploma. But because it had the backing of ISB and because it was global education at levels which were like considered excellent, that diploma started acquiring more value than a degree. So ultimately it is about the value add-on that's there, what is the basic structural foundation which is going to determine what is the value that will generate. So in this mix and match, how relevant are institutes today? Can anybody pick up, mix and match and prepare their own kind of educational course which is considered valid when you look at the whole set of certifications? Tomorrow you might have a startup which actually puts together all of those certifications and gives you one single point value that, okay, this is what you are all about. So do you see a change happening there that the traditional institutes face a lot of threat from these edtech startups offering these modular courses which are specifically geared towards addressing real world problems that we are talking about in any case? How do you see that happening?
So I think there are a couple of points here. One, in terms of this recommendation engine type, right? I would, on a lighter note, I would say we've always had this recommendation engine in India, right? All our parents have always been the best recommendation engines because somehow they will tell you when you are in school what you should do, right? It has nothing to do with what you want to do. It's like same Netflix. I watch a movie today, it shows me 10 other movies of the same type, but that's what I end up doing. So most of us have come through that system, and coaching centers and others, they are the recommendation engines. But more to your question, to respond to that, I think the pandemic has accelerated sort of, this digital transformation in education like it's never done before, right? So UGC now under the new chairman is sort of almost every week there are new announcements in terms of what I think are very good steps in terms of our higher education in this country. So one of the things is about credit transfers and recognition. And I think this was something 3-4 years ago was unthinkable. I think we are very soon coming to a stage where one can actually pick up credits from 3 institutions and then submit that to another university or one of the universities out of those 4 and say, hey, I've earned these 32 credits that are required to be awarded a degree. Will you award me this degree? So there will probably a scenario where you will have a starting university and not a university, right? Typically now we would go to, let's say, IIM Amritsar, and then maybe they have exchange program with one other university. So people typically at the end of 2 years would just go for 3-4 months elsewhere and come back. But I think what may happen is people will start at IIM Amritsar, go to 3-4 other places and come back and earn their degree there. I think that is probably happening very soon. It's also because UGC has said that up to 40% of your curriculum can be delivered online. I think that opens up immense sort of opportunities. To your question about will EdTech disrupt traditional this thing, I would say traditional educational institutions or traditional education systems are definitely going to get disrupted. Whether EdTechs will do it or otherwise is different. But I think the market is doing it because today we think of education system as learning and credentialing. I think what people are looking for is a TCS when they want to hire people are just coming to university because they say they've gone through 4 years of engineering, there's some bit of learning, but I will go put them through 1 more year of my own training in Trivandrum, right? Nobody is picking up anybody from any of our engineering colleges and say, you start working tomorrow. So it's more like they're just using our institutions right now or more as a gate pass system, right? Whether we like it or not. That is bound to change because if the same gate pass system is provided by some other university, some other edtech, some other sort of platform, why will a large employer like a TCS or anybody, I'm just using TCS as an example, come to a university? I think things will change drastically on that front. The other thing that I think it will start doing now is also that people will start doing dual degrees. To your question about liberal arts also, right? For example, we've never, if you take up biology in your +2 or if you didn't take biology in +2, let me put it this way, you can never do medicine in India, right? Why? I think this is a question for which there is no rational answer excepting to say that the system designed was that, right? I think we will now see those changes happening. I think in some sense, this is a really exciting time for higher education, because there is a resolve that, you know, we need to change the way we have been doing things, and there is this whole sort of expectation, at least the national education policy, the new education policy has a very clearly laid out thing saying that India, the aspiration is for India to be Vishwaguru, right? So which is, it is not just about attracting students or India being a source of, you know, knowledge, which is fine. We speak of Nalandas and Takshashilas, but that was so many centuries ago. There's nothing in the recent past of 100 years ago, 200 years ago. But I think what it is bound to do is that it's not just about attracting students to India, but it's about raising the quality of Indian students and Indian universities to a global standards. That I think is bound to happen, and it's incumbent on all of us here and to make that happen. I think each one of us, you spoke of micro enterprises. I think if institutions think of ourselves as micro enterprises, startups succeed with or without government support. I think the same thing is true for institutions. As you said, ISB is, we don't even call it a diploma, by the way, we just call it a program, because if I use the word diploma, I'll be violating AICTE norms, right? If I use the word degree, I'll be violating UGC norms. So we just give our students a piece of paper which is really worth the piece of paper, right? And say you have completed a postgraduate program, right? But that hasn't stopped, you know, from none less than the Honorable Prime Minister coming away and giving away graduation certificates. In some sense, that's why I'm saying it's very exciting time, because 5-10 years ago it would be unthinkable. We had a time when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh came and somebody in the Education Ministry sent him a note saying that you can't go to ISB because it's like an illegal institution or unapproved institution, right? But it's changing. I think if you do the right thing and do it consistently, so long as it's open, transparent, people are aware of what you're providing, pick up and notice, and this is a great model to follow in terms of being consistent and being sort of, you know, trying to do the right thing.
Guru just said that these are exciting times, Pallavi, and there's a strange kind of movement that one is seeing. Like you were talking about micro enterprises at an educational institute. Corporates are trying to educate their employees so that they are ready for the job that they do. They are taking on the role of education. Educational institutes are taking on the role of creating entrepreneurs. So there are overlaps that are starting to happen. So which is an exciting development that is taking place. We had Dr. Setia earlier talking about ethics with technology. Like for example, when you talk about a university like Plaksha, an institute like Plaksha coming up, there is a classic example which is given of a self-driving car on a highway where there's a lot of traffic moving on it. The self-driving car has its own algorithm operating in it. It's scanning the road using lasers, radars, whatever. Suddenly it sees that a child with a football kind of runs onto the road. Now the car has to take a decision. The car has to take a decision because the driver is sleeping at the back, because that's the idea of a self-driving car. So now the car can either swerve to the lane on the side and hit oncoming traffic and kill the passenger, or it can kill the child. The algorithm has to take that decision. If it was a human, you could say that, well, I mean, you took the decision, didn't take, whatever reason, I couldn't do anything, this is what I could do. But as an engineering problem, you have to have a clear algorithm for it. What will you do in such a situation? What will the car do? Should it slam the brakes? It still kills the child. Should it swerve and save, kill the passenger? So that's where this overlap of ethics with technology will matter, so that an engineer who is coding the algorithm can actually think about the ethics and try to program it accordingly. So is that something that is part of the vision of Plaksha?
Oh, absolutely. If you come to Plaksha in September, there is a 3-month course on ethics of technological innovation that is being offered, which is mandatory for every student across whatever discipline they're doing, and there'll be versions of it that continue. Ethics is absolutely central to technological progress, be that in the example that you described, be that in the progress around bioengineering, be that in how algorithms are written and biases and so on that are built into it. It is in everything, and it was being mentioned earlier during the introductions that technology has so much power. There is so much that can be done with it, but with all of that power, and I'm quoting Spider-Man here, comes a lot of responsibility. And that is something that is absolutely essential for every person to be trained in, particularly in technology, but also in every other discipline. The same thing would apply to business and to other disciplines. So this is something that we really focus on, not just in terms of coursework, but also as students start to work on real problems. there is a lot of project-based learning that is built in through their experiences. As they work on those projects, these questions will also arise as part of that, and they will need to learn how to address it as they think about the problem, how to put that in the framing of the problem, and how to work on it as they go along.
In fact, Plaksha is like tying up with universities like University of California at Berkeley, tying up with MIT. ISB has done a lot of tie-ups with Kellogg, Wharton, they all exist. When we talk about the globalizing of education, the globalization of higher education, how are the IIMs also gearing up for it? How is that globalizing or globalization taking place with the IIMs? How does it happen? Do you continuously scan and monitor the environment? Is there a trend that you pick up? How do you, when we talk about globalization of education, you have to kind of pick up the trends, then see how they get applied to India, and then kind of figure out the bridge somewhere in between. How does it work?
Right, great question. So, like you mentioned, IIMs also do collaborations, and so the idea is to look for meaningful partners, right? So, where there could be a synergy between the Indian institute on this side and any institute from across the world. So, there has to be a common meeting ground for both institutes to collaborate. That would be one. Now, again, the scanning process would vary from case to case, but the idea is to for them to gain something from us and for us to gain something from them. And just to cite something, so for example, when we talk about globalization, right? Ultimately, if you look at it, for something to be truly global, be it our education system or any innovation that we do, sometimes it has to be extremely local so that it becomes global, right? So as a simple example, there's a lot of talk about businesses, right? And we do a lot of research and management around that. But what is unique to India, for example, is something called family businesses, right? That is a unique phenomenon which is only seen in India. So for example, ISB Hyderabad has the research center dedicated to that. Similarly, professors in IIMs are also working on those problems, right, in the field of management. So by focusing on that local thing, which is very specific to India, we are actually gaining interest of the world as a whole. If we work on the same things which they are also working on, maybe we won't be able to contribute much. So maybe the idea to go global is to focus on something extremely local, which would be relevant for the entire world.
That's an interesting one. The idea of focusing on global is to go extremely local. Yes. Thank you so much. I think we are again out of time, and the only thing I can give in justification of running out of time is that the idea here was to give a sampler that people would want to delve into in greater detail, and I think you have all amply kind of lived up to that expectation that was there. Thank you so much, Siddharth, Pallavi, Guru, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Please stay on the stage. I now request our Managing Editor, Jyoti Kamalji, to please felicitate our guests. Mr. DNV Kumara Guru, Director, Marketing and Communications, ISB Mohali. Pallavi Jain, Director, Strategy and Programs, Plaksha University. Professor Siddharth Gaurav Majhi, Chairperson, Information and Instructional Technology Resources, IIM Amritsar. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to the next session.